Welcome to Cloud Tech Insights. In the last session, we talked about emerging AI customer strategy. In this session, we'll be talking about the intermediate AI customer strategy. These two are different. Last time when we discussed emerging AI customers, these are customers who are playing with LLMs, does not have any traditional model or LLM models running in production. When it comes to intermediate customers, these are customers who have traditional LLM models running in production, or they might have a team built for traditional model, now exploring more of the LLM side of AI. And these customer strategies will be different from the emerging AI customer strategy. The intermediate customer strategy would be using straightaway REST API based LLM frameworks to all the way to advanced MLOps, which is hosted on SageMaker. These ecosystem would have SageMaker AppSec reviewed, and also they have to get the Bedrock also AppSec reviewed, and then they can use a combination of the best of both worlds based on the use cases in their organization. So before we move on discussing the strategy, just want to remind you about my course, which is published on udemy.com, called Amazon Bedrock Learning Series. I will leave the link in the description below, as well as a coupon that would give you a discounted rate on that course. So please support me by subscribing to the course. So let's get to the strategy discussion. And the very first step is the use case formation, very similar to what we have seen in emerging organization or for any other maturity level organization. Ensure that you have clearly defined the business problem. Make sure your generative AI use case aligns with your organizational goals and it demonstrates some of the value propositions. Make sure that you have the success criteria defined for each and every use case. And also keep in mind that some of these generative AI approach are not a big bang approach. It improves over a period of time. So it is a phased approach. Try to phase out some of these use cases into phase 2 or 3 phases of release, and overall keep a good target on the accuracy that you're looking for each and every phase. Sometimes you start with a 60% accuracy, then you go up to like 70% is like phase 2, and phase 3 is 80, and then you keep on improving over a period of time with a good feedback loop. The next comes the data discovery. The data discovery is important. Understand what data and what is the granularity of the data that you want to respond on. So you can also run it on transactional data, which is highly normalized. But if you want the right data set, faster access, good performance, and good user experience, you want to make sure your data is stored in an analytical format, preferably a star schema for analytical purposes, or simple lookup tables based on your use case. Understand that very clearly. Sometimes you want to use your RAG methodology, throw the data into knowledge base. Sometimes you don't have to throw it on a knowledge base. You can just simple search and retrieve. So understanding the data sets, what are the different data sets used for, and the granularity of the data is important. Then comes the usage pattern. I think this is where you start seeing the differences. So in a intermediate organization, when you have traditional models running in the production and you have a ML, whereas emerging AI customers usually don't have an ML team that's playing and toying with some of these framework. So understanding the usage pattern for this generative AI use case is really important. Understand the number of end users, is the latency to provide them with a good experience. Some needs good short-term microsecond latency, some just needs a few second latency. So understanding that is very important. And also understand whether you need how many requests per minute, how many users are accessing, how many times they're accessing this application. It's very important to figure out and pick the right framework for your use case. And then comes the framework selection. So like I said, for intermediate customer, I would highly recommend using both Bedrock and SageMaker in their ecosystem. The reason why I'm saying, for some of the API-based developers, it's much easier to work on Bedrock, and for some of the advanced ML team or data scientists, they can use Amazon SageMaker for their use cases. So there are a couple of factors, like one is the usage pattern, one is the models that you want to pick, whether it's a proprietary model or open source model. Based on that, you can pick and choose the SageMaker. And the other one is the latency. Sometimes you can have more granular control over your latency using certain instance types within SageMaker. And Bedrock also provide provision throughputs, but if you want more granular control over your models, like if you want to quantize your model, you have those options within SageMaker. And some of the latest developments in AWS Summit around your SageMaker inference toolkits would allow you to improve the performance of your model using certain libraries. And also want to highlight that you should spend some time to figure out what vector database to be selected. So for your knowledge base, Amazon Bedrock provide a default knowledge base like OpenSearch Serverless, which is good. But in your use case, you want to deep dive, understand whether you want to gather a context-based information or similarity-based search or a simple search and retrieval, which means if it's a simple search and retrieval, you can use a Lambda and query the data using Athena or one of your libraries. But if it's a context-based or a similarity-based, you want to make sure you use the right database. So similarity, I would say OpenSearch is a good tool or database to store and figure out the similarity score of the question you asked and pick the right information out and provide it to the GenAI model. But when it's a context-based, there is no question. You need something like a knowledge base to be there and data to be stored in the knowledge base. And again, understand how big is this data set. Again, the bigger the data, the knowledge base becomes bigger and less performant as it grows really big. So again, choose knowledge base or not based on some of these factors. And next comes the prompt engineering. So this is also very common across the emerging and intermediate customers. Like you exhaust your option with prompt engineering. Ensure you add more information. Provide like context learning for your prompts so that it gives you the best results. So you can also gather some of the feedbacks that you get from your customers using the application saying, oh, this response was good, and pull that information into this context and give them more feedback. Hey, these are rated as number 1 or number 5 on the response scale, and want to build something similar so that the model understands that it's looking for a similar response that is rated number 5 by the customer. And this is one thing that is clear differentiator between intermediate and emerging organization is start building the culture of building evaluation data sets. So this is very important. You can use the open source data evaluation data sets, but you should also start building your own data sets to evaluate the model based on your organization's use case, not a generic use case. So that's very important. Start building those data sets, and these data sets can be captured using the feedback loop that you get from your customers in the application front. They can say, hey, this response was good, let me rate it 5. This response was not good, I'm going to rate it 1. So ensure there is a good feedback loop when you deploy these application front end. And then comes the model evaluation. So ensure that you assess the performance of models. Again, you can use open source model, open source evaluation data set, or just your own data set, and your own data set will ensure that model performs according to your organizational values. That's very important. That makes it a clear differentiator in the market. If you use an open source model or an open source data set, that may not make sure that it aligns with your core values. So that's very important. Establish good guardrails to make sure that some of the rejections, biases, and abusive language is taken care, and that gives the Bedrock model or the Bedrock framework in general gives you that option to ensure that your model is evaluated thoroughly. And then comes the model testing, LLM with the real life use cases, ensure that it's doing well. I've seen customers doing a beta version of their application and exposing it to the end users, and they can easily provide feedback on if the response is good or not. And you can also evaluate the model in an A and B testing with SageMaker. You have that option. You can test to both models. You can route the traffic 20% to the data model and 80% to the latest model, so that you have multiple options within SageMaker as well as in Bedrock to test your model and route your traffic so that you can test out one model and then move on to the model B if it's performing better. So these are the important features. And then comes the feedback. So make sure that you get a good feedback on some of these model performance, keep on improving the prompt, or pick another model. So it goes in iterative fashion. You pick and choose the model, right model for your use case, proprietary or non-proprietary or open source. Based on your needs, you can pick and choose the model. So there are some use cases where you don't need a large language model. You just need a smaller one. The large language model introduces hallucination a little bit. So you got to make sure that you pick a small model where this 6 billion parameters should be good enough. You can go for some of the SageMaker options or use Amazon Titan models. Some of these small models can provide the right response if you provide enough context for those scenarios. So ensure that you spend time on model selection. Again, this is an iterative approach where you can use the leaderboard to determine what model works best, and then you can go in iterative fashion and figure out what is the best framework, what is the best model, what is the best vector DB, and what you can also make sure the evaluation data set is up to standard. So these are the important things that I keep in mind. It's an iterative process until you find what is the best model for you, what is the best prompt for you, what is the best evaluation set for you. And once that is complete, you move on to the model serving parts. Again, SageMaker and Bedrock provides two different options for serving the model. Again, based on your usage, you can easily pick a serverless option or a managed option. Both are available on Bedrock and SageMaker. Bedrock gives you more a serverless approach, quick wizard-based approach, and SageMaker is also getting there. You have multiple options, more granular control. You can have more than one model versions hosted on the instance. And again, based on your usage, you can pick and choose serverless versus managed options within SageMaker and Bedrock. And then comes the performance testing. This is the most important part. You want to give your customer the best experience using your generative AI application. So you want to test the model, test the stress model to see if it's performing according to your SLA or your requirements, and make sure that you pick and choose the right model. Again, you can pick and choose Amazon Bedrock for provision throughputs. You can also use SageMaker for more granular control. Play with the model. You can also play with the model sizing using quantization. There are various, you can reduce the size of the LLM model into a smaller model, and then the performance of overall performance increases. Again, depends upon your team and the use case. You can pick and choose the right framework to run, test, and see if the model performs good. And then comes the model deployment. Amazon Bedrock provides easy few model deployments, and it's an open source model. SageMaker is a good option. There are different deployment that you can get. You can go serverless, you can go managed options, and you can also go for your EKS. You can deploy your model on EKS, export the model from SageMaker, host it on EKS, run your analytic requests on EKS clusters, and leverage some of those autoscalers within EKS. So you have multiple options, and based on your team's maturity within the intermediate organization, you pick and choose the most efficient deployment model. And then comes the end user feedback. And this is the most important piece that I would say that clearly differentiate emerging organization from intermediate organization is the feedback. You have to collect the feedback from the end users in your beta generative AI application. You want to make sure they rank the response that provided by generative AI application, and in that way you are again building the culture of AI by capturing some of these labeled data set. When I say labeled data set, which means if a customer asks, give me a status on my order, and you provide a response, this is the status on the response, and now the customer says this was excellent, I'm going to rate this as 5, which means you are capturing some of these information in some of these databases so that you can use this in a later phase. Let me repeat this again. Did not use it the first phase. Later phase, if you want to really improve it, if you want to be a market differentiator when it comes to generative AI application, you want to make sure that you build your own training data. Let me repeat that again. You build your own training data. Start building that culture around building this training data, accumulate the data for a couple of months, and once you think that you are ready with your labeled data, you can use this data to conduct reinforcement learning with human feedback for your model, which means you are training your model with your own organization data, which means that that model a clear differentiator from the proprietary model that's available in the market. So let's say if you pick a Claude model and keep on training, then it becomes your own organization's model. If you pick a GPT J6P and train, you are making a small model perform for a very specific task within your organization. And this is not a phase where I would recommend for all the organization, but start building those culture. Ensure that you have training data. Let's say 1 or 2 years down the lane, the model training becomes cheaper, the instances become cheaper. That's when you start catering the model according to your data set. It's very important piece. So this is another thing clearly differentiate from the emerging organization with the intermediate organization, and some of the advanced organization ML organizations are already doing some of these tasks. They're using the smaller model training with their own data for a very specific task, and such models are more performant and very easy to host, and something to think about, not implement as part of the intermediate organization. You just build, and once you mature to an advanced ML, that's when you start thinking about training the models. So with this, I'm calling it a wrap, and we will have more discussion on advanced ML ops team or ML maturity team in the future. With that, I'm calling it a wrap. And in the next session, I'll be talking about the advanced or the mature ML organization, how they conduct the AI strategy in their organization. So if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for the latest information. Signing off, John.